Welcome, everyone, to the PCS Like a Pro show. I am your host, Megan Harless, as always, and I'm excited for you to join us today because we're going to be talking about a topic that many families are going through right now, especially with peak season being over and people settling into their homes and getting stuff unpacked and put together. We're going to be talking about claims today. So joining us today, we have Robert from Suddath joining us. So welcome to the show, Robert.
Thank you for having me.
Can you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the claims director for Suddath Government Services. I've been in this industry now for over 20 years. I'm second generation. I've done everything from carrying furniture out of basements to driving a truck across the country to running claims department, which is my current role. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. So we're going to dive in and talk about everything claims related and what families need to know. So the first thing is that we know there are several different types of claims that a family could possibly file depending on what their need is. So can you break these claims down a little bit about what they are and when they're used, like the essential claim versus a quick claim, and then like the inconvenience claim and like the regular claims that we all hear about?
Absolutely. So there's two different claim types, right? There's many different types of claims, but there's two fundamentally broader topics, which is cargo damages versus contractual damage. So your cargo damage is all subject to your max liability. So the first one would be the essential item that you said. So the essential item is the items that are necessary for everyday use, but they're typically limited to refrigerators, if it's the only one for storing food, any necessary medical equipment, your washer and dryer, if it's your only one. And customers have to understand that they must notify their TSP within 7 calendar days from delivery that this item was essential, right? And it's not just writing it on the NOLD, formerly known as the 1850. It's not called that anymore. On the NOLD, you have to call up your TSP and communicate and say, hey, I don't have another washer and dryer. And then the TSP has 2 government business days to either replace or make temporary accommodations for that essential item. And then the second one we talked about is quitclaim. This is, again, following the cargo line. So quitclaim is also handled outside of DPS. It is something that is handled within 5 calendar days from your delivery, and any item up to $1,500. $1,500 is the max. So you can do as many items as you want as long as it stays under that max. And the intent is we don't want you to have to do something arduous like going into DPS and filing a claim, filling out all this stuff. We can settle that right here, right now for the quitclaim. But anything paid out on the quitclaim cannot be claimed later.
Right. And so really quick, the essential claim and the quick claim, those we contact our move coordinator and let them know we need to file those, and they help connect us with the claims department then to handle those?
Absolutely. Okay. So that move coordinator is then going to know exactly what you're talking about, and then they're going to transition that communication or pass the proverbial ball to the claims department, and then we can execute. Yep.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps explain that process a little bit, to know that those are not in DPS. We can do those directly with our TSP.
Yes, absolutely. So then the regular claims, the regular FRV claims, the ones inside DPS, those are the ones where you just file your claim, you go in there, you fill out the damage. That's how all claims are required to be handled, unless they're essential item or quick claim that we already spoke about. But those timelines are, you have 180 days to provide written notification. Okay, it's not to file, just written notification. So it has to be specific, though. You have to say number 24 chair is damaged. This can be accomplished via an email, the NOLD, anything on the delivery documents. As long as that notification is in writing, it satisfies that burden. at which point you then have 9 months to file for FRV. So FRV is full replacement value, which means it's not how much it cost, it's what the value is now. So if that TV was $3,000 2 years ago when you bought it, and it's $500 now, then you're only entitled to $500. But the inverse is true now. So some things have went up, right?
Yeah.
Materials went up, so maybe you paid $150 for a chair, but that same chair is $250 now. You're entitled to $250. And then past the 9 months, you have up to 2 years to file for ACV, or depreciated value.
Mhm.
Right? That's when we take how percentage of the useful life and deduct that from the replacement cost, and that's what you get. So I encourage you, provide the notice within 180 days and file within the 9 months.
Yes. And I think that timeline, because it used to be a much shorter timeline up until a few years ago. And so I think that timeline gives us now some more time to be able to get things unpacked, get things settled. So I can tell you on a previous move, we PCS, or it was my ETS move at 37 weeks pregnant. We got our stuff delivered on a Monday. I met my doctor on Wednesday. I was 39 weeks then. And on Saturday, we were having a baby. And I can tell you, like, a lot of things did not quickly get unpacked. And so I appreciate now having that longer timeline where when life happens, we've got some breathing room to be able to get stuff unpacked to see what's damaged and what isn't. And if we need to file a claim, or if it's, okay with whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to be able to help our military communities and families understand more about kind of how the claims process is handled on the TSP side of things. So can you give us like a brief walkthrough of what happens when you get notified that a claim is being filed, and can you break that down, just like what happens on your side of things?
Sure. So immediately, claim is filed, that comes into our workflow. Then what we're doing, we have our pre-adjudication team taking a look at that file. They're scanning it for missing items and immediately doing a trace, right? They're contacting every single party in the chain of custody and trying to hunt down that item. I mean, it's always better for everybody if we find that item. So on top of that, they're also notifying all the parties in the chain of custody of a claim, i.e. a potential liability, as we're required to do by law. So they're doing all those notifications, and then they're also evaluating that claim to see if an inspection is needed. Can we handle this based on the information in the file, or do we need a independent third-party inspector to go out and evaluate the claim and the damage? And then once we have all that information and that file is ready, it then gets to the adjuster's desk. The adjuster is then evaluating all of the information that they have. They're applying the federal law, because the claims business rules are an amendment of the federal law, the Carmack Amendment, Title 49, 14706. So they're looking at all of those elements to see what warrants recovery. So they submit the offer, they deal directly with the member and settle that claim. Once that's finalized, then that file moves to the post-adjudication team, who then works on the accountability piece. They go to the members of supply chain, determine liability, and charge back accordingly. So people are being held accountable.
No, that's good to hear. I think there's a lot of times on our side of things that, we know maybe the driver and the hauler did a great job, but it was poor packing or vice versa for whatever reason. And just wondering, like, how does that process work of who's accountable? And sometimes it's confusing. Like, do I file my claim with the TSP? Do I need to go back to the packers because they packed it poor and file with them? So being able to hear how you guys go back and you trace it back to who's that responsible party, I think goes a long way to having some transparency on our side to how that process kind of works. You mentioned in there about using an inspector who comes out to our home and looks at the damaged items that we are claiming. So can you talk a little bit about this inspector piece of things? Like, what is their role? What are they doing? And then like, how is what they see and what they say, how is that used in the claim process?
Sure. So an inspector has to go out and give us his professional opinion as to the origin of that damage, right? Because in the CARMAC, under the Title 49, a customer has to establish a prima facie case. I don't know why the law likes Latin terms, but it's not my fault. But that means there's three elements to that. They have to prove that, one, the item was tendered in a certain condition, that's accomplished through the inventory. The item was arrived in a damaged condition or not at all. And that's a big part of what the inspector does. And then number three is pretty easy because then it costs money. Whatever damage or loss actually caused a financial hardship. So that inspector's going in and really focused on that second element. Was this, looking at the PED, I'm an independent, unbiased, I've got no vested interest in the outcome of this claim. Was this damage a result of transit? Or, even if it was damaged, was it one of the carrier's exclusion? The biggest one they're looking for is called inherent vice, right? Inherent vice is, something that some damage that could not have been prevented through normal transit conditions, right? And that's something that is going all the way back to Supreme Court decisions of 1964. It was Missouri Pacific versus Elmore and Stahl. That's one of the most cited court cases. But anyway, they're providing us that information so we can use that in our justification of our adjudication. Because we can't just pay claims. We have to have substantiation.
Right.
So,
yeah, no, absolutely. So with this claims process, like how can a family kind of help the claims process be a little bit smoother and maybe run a little bit quicker?
I would say provide your documentation up front. Give everything that you have up front, so there's not this back and forth. We're operating off the same information, right? Educate yourself a little bit about the claims process, a little bit about what the adjusters were looking for, and then communicate, right? So, and that's going to be kind of the biggest thing you're going to hear from me is communication is really key, but providing the information up front is really going to help streamline that along.
And that information and documentation, like what are you looking for there? Like pictures or invoices or links to websites? Like what kind of things are you looking for in that documentation?
Oh, absolutely. So links to websites, that's great for substantiation. If it's a high value item, is it listed on the high value? Is the specific model number listed on the high value? Is it of extreme high value that may require some proof of ownership, just so you know that it's the same one and there's not a question? Also, proof of damage. If it's not listed, if the damage isn't listed on the delivery documents, then the delivery documents serve as proof of damage because the agent serving on behalf of the TSP and the customer are signing that they agree that damage exists. So that's proof of damage. But giving us a picture would be proof of damage. The claim itself does not constitute proof of damage. So the pictures up front and the links, all of that, absolutely.
So you brought up an interesting point about high value inventory and things appropriately listed on there. So from a claims perspective, we see a lot these days about like shoe collections. Like there are people that have like every color of the Air Jordans and whatever the new high thing is. We have a lot of spouses that have some very expensive handbags and purses. How should those be labeled and listed on a high value inventory to ensure proper protection for both the family, but also for the claims department as well?
Sure. They should be specifically listed.
Like each individual one, not just as like 22 pairs of Nike Jordans, multiple colors, all size 8, or do I need to list every single one of those 22 pairs?
It depends on the value, is what I
Okay.
would say. But if it is very high value, this Jordan collection, I would absolutely list every one of them, because then you're really providing another layer of substantiation. If maybe the collection is not that valuable, but still qualifies as the high value, then 22 pairs may be acceptable, as long as you had a picture before the move, showing this collection, substantiating that claim. Yeah, I would say it depends.
I mean, that's a fair answer. I think, yeah, no. So what can a family do prior to moving to kind of help protect their items, or kind of help have stuff in order in case there is a claim?
Oh, absolutely. Well, pre-move counseling is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to understand everything's going on in the move, and how to fill out the paperwork, and what to look for, and what to document, and what your rights are paramount to having a good move. Secondly, is having the substantiation of your high value items. Highly recommend, if you have something very expensive, get that documentation before you move, because in the event of a loss or damage, it's not a question. It's a, this is what it is. It's not in contention. Okay, here's the payment. Sorry. And making sure that you separate items that you don't want to go, having a no move designated area is very beneficial. And I highly recommend items of sentimental value that you hand carry whenever possible. Because as we had spoke about the Carmack earlier, one of the damages that movers are precluded from paying is sentimental damages. So if it's your kid's drawing and it's super important to you, the mover would technically only be liable for the piece of paper that it's drawn on. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense with that. Let's take a minute and talk about one of our favorite things, and that's to discuss catastrophic losses. It's something that nobody wants to talk about, but we do encounter a few of those every year for one reason or another, unfortunately. But how are catastrophic losses handled on the TSP side of things? Can you walk us through that process from your side of the table?
Sure. So again, communication is key. The fact of the matter, and what we like to do, is run to that claim and establish a communication plan right in the beginning, right? And we want to make sure that we're aligned, because it's not us versus the customer, it's us versus the problem, right? And we're going to let the problem be the problem. So we want to establish communication right away. We want to take mitigating efforts, right? Which is almost a common misnomer. They're like, oh, my stuff was wet and the mover wiped it out. Well, not only can they mitigate, they actually have an absolute duty to mitigate. But that's not remediate, right? That's just to wipe this stuff down to prevent further damage. Now, if we have to get a remediation company out there, then we get the MCO involved. At that point, hire a remediation company. They come out, they do an evaluation. What can be saved, what can't be saved. They send that estimate to us. We send that to the MCO, and then they engage the service member to say, is there a documented medical condition that would make remediation unsuitable for you? Maybe some people have some kind of medical condition, and some people do. And in which case, we don't do remediation for that. But then we get the approval from the MCO, and then remediation is performed. Those items are delivered. Anything that can't be remediated then gets, any affected items that can't be remediated then get paid at FRV.
Is there a timeline or estimated timeline when there is a catastrophic loss, on when that notification happens that you have a catastrophic loss to when it should be settled with possible remediation? Or is it depends on what it is and depends on how big the shipment is?
We want to get them handled as soon as possible. Catastrophic losses are very challenging, but they're also very vast when it comes to like the variety and what's actually happened. Some of them can be handled very quickly. We have a really good remediation company in that market, and we're able to react quickly and resolve it quickly. Some of them we don't. We're dealing with, it was a truck accident, a truck caught on fire. Now, the maybe the police, maybe there was something that happened. The police have to release that vehicle to the tow yard. Then the tow yard has to release the vehicle to us, and then we have to get in there and get this dumpster full of debris out of there and to a remediation. So that's just one extreme example, but I'm just using that to justify my "it depends" answer, because it really does. We want to get them done as soon as possible. We don't want to put families through this. I wouldn't want to be put through it. But that's where communication is our biggest asset, and just continuing to working on it. Luckily, with the military, we have a lot of resources that on the civilian side they don't. Thanks to the Service Member Civil Relief Act, nobody can detain a government shipment. You cannot do it. So we have a lot of top support from both the MCOs and Transcom to help move this along if there are impediments, like the tow companies and police departments and whatnot. So again, it's in everybody's best interest to push these things through as fast as possible, but talk to your TSP and work with them. Be my advice.
Can you talk a little bit about the technical aspect of that catastrophic loss from what would constitute? I know sometimes you can receive that 10% of your liability payment within a certain time frame, and then just the filing the claim, there's times where you have to itemize everything that's in your shipment that you're claiming into like an Excel spreadsheet. Can you talk a little bit to when that is needed and why it's needed?
Sure. So that's a really great question, because this comes up a lot. Maybe a lot of families don't know about this, but when a loss happens at 60% or more, then the business rules mandate that the TSP provide a prepayment of 10%. But they're also still liable for an inconvenience claim 14 days after that 10% has been issued. So the families can still get their inconvenience claim, which is contractual. That's part of the TOS. That's not cargo, but the 10% is. Now, when they go through and the adjudication process goes on, say, for instance, okay, I'm not speaking universal truisms here, but for instance, it's a total loss. Oftentimes, we'll go down the inventory and itemize and claim it just to make it easier. Just to say, okay, I think this box is X amount, and we'll work through that, applying, like I said, the business rules and the laws to get to that final settlement. We don't want to make it any more arduous than it has to be. You've been through enough, and it's not a question of what happened here. So oftentimes we'll work down the inventory and we'll put the numbers on there. We'll get a waiver to sign outside of settle outside of DPS, and then anything that we is above our cap, then we can transfer to the MCO, and they can adjudicate it further under the PCA.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps. And it's important to note for everyone that the liability amount is $6 per pound up to $75,000. So if you only have a 10,000 pound shipment, you're only looking at your max liability being up to the $60,000. So it's important to keep that in mind. I know we've seen it several times where people are just like, well, they're only giving me the 75,000, but it's going to cost me 200,000 to replace everything. Like, who can I go and sue? And it's like, unfortunately, like, you can't really go that route. They've met their contract obligation. These are your other avenues that you can go down, which is the MCO or filing with your private insurance. That everybody should have. If you don't have a personal property insurance policy of some sort, or renter's insurance policy of some sort, you should. And you should make sure that it covers your household goods in transit. and in storage. We've done an episode on that previously, so we'll get that linked into the comments below so you guys can go back and look at that to hear all about the different types of insurances and policies and what you may or may not need depending on your situation and depending on what you own as well. But just something that everybody should have standing there. So we talked a lot about claims today, a lot of good information, a lot of good things that families need to know. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned that you want to make sure our families know about in regards to claims and claims filing?
I would just say, again, what the drum I've been beating the whole time is communicate with your TSP, work with them. Listen, my adjusters want to be good at their jobs. They want to come home at night saying I helped somebody. That's what they want to do. So go in there with understanding, and if give them the information that they need, they will gladly give you the check that you deserve, that you're entitled to, and it won't be a question. So let's work together. Like I said, it's not an a relationship where it's us against each other. It's us versus the problem. So work with us, communicate with us, and let's solve the problem together.
No, absolutely. So thank you, Rob, for taking time out of your day and joining us and educating us more about that claims process and what all those little pieces means, that way we know what to expect should we end up in that situation. And everybody else joining us today, thank you for tuning in and listening, and hopefully you've picked up something that you didn't know before to help you through your next situation should you ever have one. If you're in the middle of a PCS, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you've got any questions or concerns, we're happy to help in any way you can. And if you've got any more claims questions that come up, drop them in the comments. We'll send them to Rob. We'll get the answers. We'll send them all back to you. Make sure you join us again next week, same time, same place, Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We've got another great show for you then. And until then, everyone take care of each other.